This is a very serious passage that was just read to you. Last week we read Isaiah 9 and verse 2. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light, and on those living in a land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. I absolutely love that passage. And we immediately, if you listened to last week, we connected that to the first chapter of the Gospel of John, where he takes that motif, that theme, and he runs with it throughout his gospel, that we live in a very dark place, but light has come. And he even says, but the darkness hasn't acknowledged the light. It's a fascinating metaphor. But if you start a little earlier than we did last week, what was just read to you out of Isaiah 8 helps to explain what went wrong. Those who were distressed, they looked everywhere for answers except up. They looked down. Distressed and hungry, they will roam through the land. They will look toward the earth and see only distress and darkness and fearful gloom. Now, sadly, that describes a great bulk of humanity there, including a great number of Christians who see only doom and only gloom. And all they can talk about is this must be the end of times. But they've been saying that for 2,000 years. But this time, they're really sure. They see depression, they see persecution, and they wonder what's going to happen. But they keep their eyes locked on the darkness and the gloom. The light is here. It's dawned. But they're looking toward the earth. They're looking toward experts. Let's see what the experts tell us. Maybe our political leaders, maybe the talking heads on podcasts or on the news, maybe they can tell us what to do. Maybe we need a better psychology. Maybe we need cultural leaders. Maybe we need influencers. They will give us the light, and we're constantly adding more and more of those voices to our heads, looking for light, but we're looking toward the earth. We get dirt in our eyes because we're looking at dirt. People admit they're in darkness. So what is their solution? Instead of looking up, their solution is more of what they're already doing. Maybe a little bit more government, a little bit more wisdom from our televisions, maybe a little bit more social media channels, maybe a better psychology, a human potential movement, and then we'll be fine. Maybe just a little bit more time with our phones. The old country song spoke of looking for love in all the wrong places. And while that's true, I think people are looking for light in all of the wrong places. Even in the Christmas season, you will hear countless ads telling you that you can be happy, fulfilled, and your life can be as exciting as the life you're watching on television if you only buy this product, or if you only give that product, or if you only receive that product. It's still earthbound looking, an earthbound focus, earth, earth, earth. Never looking up, never looking beyond ourselves. It's as if we believed that technology, innovation, government, and tribalism can bring us light. It's as if we think that somehow through our own efforts, looking toward the earth, we can find a way to bring unity and peace on earth and goodwill toward men. I would just like to ask, how's that working? It's never worked. We are very divided. We're not united. Since you've had all these influencers and all the extra channels of information in your head, are we more divided or less? Well, the answer comes out that we're more divided. We're less happy, even though we're richer. The economics report on the state of the planet was released. They do this every few years, and found that in America, let me just talk to the Americans for a moment. In America, the lowest standard of living, according to the study, is in Mississippi. However, the average person in Mississippi is richer than the average person in Europe. And the average person in Europe is far richer than the average person in Africa or Asia. So even in America's poorest section, we're richer than the rest of the world, and yet ask if we're happy. Václav Havel, the first president of the Czech Republic, is rightly admired as the one who had the most responsibility and who actually really gets the credit for bringing that republic out of the darkness of communism and dictatorship. However, he knew that that was not enough. It would not bring light to his people. So he said this: "Pursuit of the good life will not help humanity save itself, nor is democracy alone enough. A turning to and seeking of God is needed. The human race constantly forgets that he is not God." Correct. I admit that it baffles me whenever I hear people indicate that they believe by their collective efforts they can bring unity and peace into the world at large and into our lives as individuals. Why does that baffle me? Look deeply into your own heart and answer the question, why people like us, you and me, cannot bring unity and light. Well, if we're being honest with ourselves, if we will allow ourselves some time of deep introspection, we are forced to admit that we, not just you, we are flawed, deeply flawed. There are aspects of my thoughts, my character, my behavior that need to be better and yet are not better despite all my efforts. And I bet the same can be said for you. It certainly was said by Paul about himself in Romans 7 when he said, "What I want to do, I end up not doing. What I say I will not do, I end up doing. O wretched man that I am, who will save me from this body of death?" So what makes us think that a collection of very flawed people who cannot even correct their own behavior can gather together, and if we add all of the negatives and brokens and flaws together, somehow we'll come out with a net positive for the unity and light of the planet? We're all broken. Another person can't fix us. A different government won't fix us. A new law, a new exercise, a new drug. Those of you outside of America, America is one of the very few places on the planet where they can advertise prescription drugs that you're not allowed just to go get, but you're supposed to then go hassle your doctor to get them. And drug commercials are ubiquitous. They are on all of the channels all of the time. And as I said, I think a couple of weeks ago, my life goal is to be as happy as a person in a diabetes commercial, because they make it so exciting and so wonderful. And then they'll read the list of side effects, because once again, we're all flawed. And then people make New Year's resolutions. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there could be a lot right with that, but a New Year's resolution will not fix you if a flawed individual, you, are the one to carry it out. You're going to need to look up. You're going to need more light. But most people just kind of give up. They stop the introspection. Some of them live in denial, pronouncing that they're all right. I'm fine. I don't know about the rest of you. You're all mess, but I'm fine. I've got a good relationship with myself, and I know me, and I'm happy to accept myself as I am. Most can't do that for very long, not if they pay real close attention. And then they make the mistake of focusing on their brokenness. And they elevate the brokenness to some sort of a victim standard to where now the world must bend around me because I'm broken. Don't you see? I'm broken. Notice that I'm broken. I need to bring up I'm broken in every conversation. Then others will take a third path. Sadly, at times I think this is a majority path, where instead of looking at their own brokenness, or instead of understanding that they need help outside themselves, they focus on the faults and the evils of others. And that becomes our identity, to point, to shame, to put a derogatory comment on a video or on a tweet or any of the others. That is our world of political and social pundits. That is what we pump into our living rooms and into our very brains through our earbuds. And then we wonder why we have no peace. We wonder why we're so divided. Should we turn to science for the answer? I'm a big fan of science. I'm part of it. I love it. I work within it. But while I adore science, it will not bring you light. because science can tell you the what. It can even tell you the why in relationship to the mechanism of the what. But it cannot tell you the why about existence. It can't tell you the whys of life or the reason for life. It cannot measure your value. It can measure everything else about you. Your weight, your height, all the different things going on in your blood and your body. But you print that out. Do you have a good picture of yourself? No. You know you are more than dirt. Staring at dirt and dirt-born product will not give you the why, the reason for why you're here. And if you choose to keep looking down, life will truly be nasty, brutish, and short. And once we die, our name is forgotten. Ask somebody the name of their great-great-grandfathers. Most of them cannot do that unless they're really into genealogy. But they know where to go find it, perhaps. But even don't know that. Now, to me, that's not depressing because my eyes aren't earthbound. I'm not full of mud. I want to notice the light. I want to look up. The late Timothy Keller put it this way, and I can find no way to improve his words, so I'm just going to quote them here. Christmas, therefore, is the most unsentimental, realistic way of looking at life. It does not say, cheer up. If we all pull together, we can make the world a better place. The Bible never counsels indifference to the forces of darkness, only resistance. But it supports no illusions that we can defeat them ourselves. Christianity does not agree with the optimistic thinkers who say, we can fix things if we try hard enough. Nor does it agree with the pessimists who only see a dystopian future. The message of Christianity is instead, things really are this bad, and we can't heal or save ourselves. Things really are this dark. Nevertheless, there is hope. Now today, if you're watching this close to the day that we post this, it's live right now, and those watching live, you may or may not be aware that a sea change has occurred in the nation of Syria over the last 24 hours. It looks to be that the ruler, Assad, who has been part of the ruling family there for 50 years, the Assad family, has fled. The army has laid down its arms, and jihadists have taken Syria. Syria was a proxy of Iran and Russia, but Russia has been involved with other things, and Iran has been involved with other things, and they weren't able to prop it up. And now even a more radical jihadism has entered. Today, right now, in the Valley of Christians in Syria, Christians are meeting in their churches while those churches are being attacked. They are singing songs of hope and praise while crosses are being torn down. 2% of Syria's people are Christian, and one of the oldest surviving Christian communities is there in Damascus. Do we really think that if we just send one more missile, that'll fix it? Or if we do one more world war, that will fix it? Where are these people getting their hope? They're not hoping in tanks. They're looking up. Maybe those of us comfortable in the West should learn to look up before the crisis hits us. Where does their hope come from? From a light that appeared in Bethlehem of Judea. As John says in John chapter 8 and verse 12, Jesus is light, which makes a wonderful thing to bring up here. When you read John, he is reinterpreting the creation story. Remember what were the first words of God in the book of Genesis? Let there be light. Jesus comes into the world. He is light. He is that positive force. He is a changer. He is the one who brings us a light that, it reveals all. It reveals our flaws and our brokenness. But why would light do that? Because when we come to the light, we learn who we are. And we come back to where we belong. Back to before the Garden of Eden. We who were made in the image of God, and that is all of you and all of us here at the sound stage today. We are finally back in the hands of the God who made us, who designed us from the ground up, literally, from the dirt up. He designed us. In all of creation, God spoke everything into existence except us. We are the only thing He made by hand. We are the only handmade thing in the universe. And so when the light hits us, even with all of our flaws and our brokenness, we are back where we belong. As Scripture says in Acts chapter 17, verse 28, in Him we live, we move, we have our being. And Colossians tells us that not only did He make all things, but that in Him all things consist, or another translation, all things hold together. We were designed from the ground up to be with Jesus, to be in the light. That light brings us information, just as light does in the natural world. You want to read a book, you're going to need some light. You want to learn how to watch a video to learn how to change the brakes on your car, you're going to need some light. You're going to need some power. I was recently driving through a very difficult rainstorm. It was very foggy. It was nighttime, pounding rain, and there were people without their lights on the interstate. Some of them driving gray cars that appeared like ghosts out of nowhere. We know how difficult and how dangerous that is, and I assume they didn't know they didn't have their lights on. Do you really want to go through this world without your light? This light, we need the light. In fact, we even refer to somebody learning something as the lights came on. And in the days of newspapers and comic strips, the comic strips are the only reason I really wanted the newspaper. If somebody got an idea, how did they show it? A light bulb. We need light. We need to look up. There are those that have had to go without light for long periods of time. And here, I don't really want to take a detour and talk about using darkness as a torture. The fact is that people who have been kept in absolute darkness develop a 36 to 48 hour day. It is bizarre. It's unhinged to the universe. And once they're released, the psychological problems continue. But I'm talking more about those, and some of us have lived in these areas, that live closer to the poles. And there's a lot of darkness a lot of the year. Those of us that have lived there know exactly what I'm talking about before I even start. There are physiological issues. If you don't get enough vitamin D, which you mainly get from sunlight, and best get from sunlight, then rickets and all kinds of other issues can result. But there are psychological issues. I can remember we spent, I've lived in Scotland, Colorado, and Detroit. I've had the cold that I want to have. You know, that's I like to visit snow every now and then, maybe wave at it from a distance from a very heated, insulated car. But, and I know people love snow. That's not the point. Hang on with me. It is the darkness that gets to people. And in the Detroit area, Michigan has a lot of cloudy days. And in the winter, the cloudy days, the cold, and the wind, some people revel in that, but a great portion of the population develops something called seasonal affective disorder. Appropriately, the initials spell SAD. It makes you feel that way. It can cripple you psychologically. It can make it difficult to do mental tasks, easier to slide in depression. You'll have brain fog, confusion, fatigue. Some of you are describing, you think I'm describing you right now. It would be worse if you did not see the light. We need light. We need the sun. We need to see. Now, even those of you with blindness, you need to see, and you know what I'm talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about. With Helen Keller, who was unable to hear and unable to see, it wasn't until her teacher was able to associate running water with moving of her finger across the palm to draw a symbol for the water that she suddenly saw. She realized the world and was able then to learn and to prosper and to become a great spokesperson in our society and our history. We need to see. And what happens when you see? Everything. Yeah, we do see in stark relief our own faults, our own brokenness. But instead of leading us to despair, it brings us to a different spirit within us. It helps us understand that, well, if we're hurting, so are they. It allows us, in the spirit of honesty, to say, well, if we're all flawed people, then perhaps I should judge people more fairly, more kindly. Other people are hurting too. One of the things that I would remind my children of whenever they would go off or we'd be in different places is, please remember, everybody you meet is having a hard time today. Everybody. Everybody you meet is carrying pain of some sort today, especially those that act like they're not. Once we realize this, we strike out far less often. We expect perfection less. And we even expect agreement less. Why should flawed people find an agreement? If we're disagreeing, fine. This was something as this last week, I traveled from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, up to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and hit all the points in between, it seemed like, visiting house churches, prisoners, and the like. And at one gathering, I was new to some of them because they were part of another house church. And one of the things, and by the way, the house church, I was very, very impressed and very happy that they're doing what they're doing. But they would say, well, what do you guys think about this? And now how do you handle that? And I would just keep saying, we don't talk about that. We talk about Jesus. As I've said since the early days of our Safe Harbor, we are just the heart pumping out Jesus. We are not your brain. You take Jesus and you do with him what you do with him. We are not going to be here saying, we've noticed several of your faults. I have a list here. We're not going to do that. Neither are we going to play victim and act like the world's coming to an end, therefore we're all doomed. Our God is not afraid. He is not about to leave the throne. He's not hopping on a plane for an undisclosed location. We are children of that God, and Jesus is our King. We also, when we get into the light, we do find our flaws, but we also find our value, because it doesn't just point out the flaws. It points out the reality of God loving us anyway. As I sat around the table this last week, one of the visits I made, I looked around and I said, if you were going to start a house church movement, who in this room would you pick? And they all got a little quiet because they all realized where I was going with it. None of us were qualified. I'm certainly not qualified. My degrees are in science. I'm a fault-filled individual who, like Paul, can quote Romans 7 and apply it to himself. And I'm in a room full of others. And I said, can you find a really good, strong person in the Bible that God chose to lead something? Now, I added that last clause because you can find really good people like Ruth. Ruth comes to mind. I don't see anything in Ruth that is not admirable, but God didn't choose her to lead anything. Who did he choose to lead? Abraham? Have you read this story? Abraham had some real problems. Moses had anger problems, judgment problems, and I really think was an introvert that was shoved into leadership. Wonder how that feels. Then there's David. Do we have to even talk about murder, adultery, treachery and treason? Why did God pick these people? Because we are these people. The only reason our safe harbor can be as successful as it is because God took our loaves and fishes and did this. It wasn't us. And people kept asking me this week, there was a common question. They were saying, now, how did you plan for this? And I said, the plan is not the word. That's not what happened. And others would say, well, what are your goals? And I said, to hang on to the Holy Spirit and move at His speed in His direction. That's it. One even asked if we had a 2 or 3 year plan. I said, no. Our plan is to move at the speed of the Spirit and move in love. Be intentional in love, follow Jesus. That's it. And a lot of people were going, well, that can't work. And I'm going, but it is. And it will continue to do so because He is God. We are not just a collision of stardust arranged by accident into a human being who will live and die and be forgotten by that same universe. No, we are eternal beings, handcrafted by the light, who is the source of all life and holds all life together. We will never be forgotten. And while on earth our names will be lost in the future, we will all know our names on Resurrection Day, Reunion Day. Some people call it Judgment Day, but that sounds scary to people. So I prefer to call it Reunion Day, because that's when we go where we belong and we are with the people God made. God does not deny our faults and sins. He wants us to be better. Our sins cause harm. Our sins cause the fall of families, the fall of individuals, and the fall of nations. And yet, Isaiah 53, He came to take the blow. By His stripes, we are healed. He took the blows. He shows us His hands. And He still loves us like He loved Peter. Peter who denied Him. Only one gospel has one mention that Jesus met with Peter between this and the other. That's all it says. But the next time we see Peter, he's not afraid anymore. He isn't devastated by his own failures anymore. He stands up on the day of Pentecost and he says, let me tell you about Jesus and what we did to Him, but what He will do to us in return is not revenge, but salvation. Yes, there are presents at Christmas. I passed a church recently that had a sign out that said, a smile is the best Christmas gift. I could not help but think of all the children who were being driven past that sign thinking, no! There will be presents given and received for most of us, but the greatest gift has already been given to us already if we will only lift our eyes and quit focusing upon the dirt and clear the mud from our minds and see the light. Back when I ran a counseling program, and I'll close with this story. It was, I met some interesting people. And it was a good time, but a hard time. And one young lady came in who was suffering from depression, a nice young Christian lady. And we went through all the checklists. We had several visits, and we checked everything I could find. She was doing the right things as far as I could see. And then as I got to the point where I had to say, my bucket is empty. I cannot find what's going on. And the medical doctors were looking at their side, so we weren't leaving that out. I said, I can't find what I'm missing. And she sighed. She goes, well, I don't know, maybe it's, well, I read a lot of horror novels. I said, really? And she started mentioning some of the authors. I won't mention them here. But I said, you read these a lot? She goes, yeah, I'm fascinated by them. I read them, every night. I said, I think we might have spotted something. You're getting muddy eyes. You're staring at the wrong thing. We need to be willing to look away from this world for solutions to our hurt, to our pain, and look up to the Lord of light who came to us that blessed night in Bethlehem of Judea. Stay with us as we go through this month, a blessed month of Advent.